Security, remove this individual immediately before I'm forced to involve law enforcement.
The words sliced through the air-conditioned silence like a guillotine blade. Terrence Blake hadn't uttered a single word yet. His offense? Existing in a charcoal Brioni suit, while black. Standing at a counter he technically owned. Breathing air, his money paid to climate control. Around him, phones materialized like weapons. The college student by the water fountain. The realtor was waiting for her client. The retired teacher deposited her pension check. Everyone is recording. Everyone is watching. Everyone is about to witness the most expensive mistake in banking history. Because while branch manager Diane Morrison was speed dialing 911 to report a suspicious person, she had absolutely no idea she was staring directly at the signature that approved her salary. The name is engraved on the building's cornerstone. The man who would obliterate her entire existence in precisely 19 minutes. Have you ever watched someone architect their own destruction? Brick by brick, insult by insult, prejudice by poisonous prejudice? Stay with me, because what you're about to witness isn't just a story about racism. It's a masterclass in consequence. A documentary on institutional destruction. And if you've ever been judged by your appearance, ever been dismissed because you didn't fit someone's narrow expectations, ever been told you don't belong in a space you've earned the right to occupy, this moment of biblical justice is for you. Before we dive deeper into this catastrophe, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we're exposing stories the establishment doesn't want you to see. Stories about justice, accountability, and what happens when prejudice collides with power. The next 20 minutes will change how you see corporate America forever. Now, let's watch this woman destroy herself in real time. Terrence Blake pushed through the brass revolving doors at 10:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that would redefine his life and obliterate hers. The lobby was a temple to wealth. Travertine marble imported from quarries in Tuscany. Chandeliers dripping bohemian crystal that caught sunlight like captured stars. The air itself smelled expensive, perfumed with leather furniture and the quiet confidence of old money. Every detail whispered exclusivity. Every surface gleamed with the kind of polish that requires human hands and institutional pride. Terrence approached the Premier Services desk, where brass nameplates announced the gatekeepers of privilege. His Tom Ford briefcase, handcrafted Italian leather that cost more than most monthly mortgages, clicked softly against polished stone. His Rolex Daytona, not the flashy gold that screams insecurity, but the understated steel that whispers generational wealth, caught the light with each movement. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying the kind of educated precision that comes from boarding schools and Ivy League debate teams. "I need to access my portfolio documentation. There's a time-sensitive matter requiring immediate attention." The blonde woman behind the counter looked up from her computer screen. Her name tag read, Jennifer Hastings, Senior Account Representative. Her smile, professionally painted and perfectly practiced, evaporated like morning dew under blowtorch heat. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was pregnant with judgment, heavy with assumption, thick with the kind of racism that wears business casual and hides behind policy. 1 second. 2, 3, 4. Long enough for the security cameras to capture her face transforming. Long enough for doubt to curdle into suspicion. Long enough for professionalism to mutate into hostility. "I'm sorry, what?" Jennifer's voice dropped to a stage whisper designed to carry just far enough for her colleagues to hear. Just loud enough to signal alarm. "My portfolio documentation," Terrence repeated, each word deliberately spaced, carefully enunciated. The kind of speech pattern that announces education, sophistication, legitimate business. "I require immediate access for a transaction that cannot wait." Jennifer's eyes performed surgery. They dissected his navy suit, examined his Italian leather shoes, lingered on his skin color like a customs agent discovering contraband. Her gaze wasn't subtle. It was an assault, a violation dressed up as due diligence. Her colleague, a brunette whose name tag identified her as Sharon DeWitt, account manager, leaned over with the energy of a hyena spotting wounded prey. Their whispered exchange was loud enough to be intentional, soft enough to maintain deniability. "Sir," Jennifer began, loading that single syllable with enough condescension to poison groundwater. "Are you entirely certain you're in the correct financial institution? This is First Harbor National Bank." Our clientele typically. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The implication detonated across the marble lobby like a flashbang grenade. 17 conversations died simultaneously. Coffee cups froze halfway to lips. The businessman in the corner folded his Financial Times with the slow, horrified fascination of witnessing a car accident. The elderly woman in Chanel lowered her reading glasses, mouth forming a perfect O of shock. And the phones came out. Oh, the phones. The college student by the ATM hit record with the speed of someone who'd been training for this moment her entire digital life. The realtor's thumb found her camera app before her conscious mind registered what she was witnessing. Even the security guard, a 23-year veteran named Wallace who'd seen every flavor of human ugliness, reached for his personal device. They were documenting history. They just didn't know it yet. I'm precisely where I need to be, Terrence replied. His voice remained calm, preternaturally calm, the kind of controlled that comes before earthquakes, before tsunamis, before mountains split and continents shift. Sharon's laugh was musical, theatrical, designed for maximum humiliation. Jennifer, we've seen this before. They think expensive suits buy them access to premium services. That pronoun, they, it hung in the recycled air like a noose, like a confession, like evidence that would soon cost millions. Around the lobby, the phones multiplied. What started as 3 became 7 became 12. The viral documentation of American racism, captured in 4K, backed up to cloud storage, already being airdropped to friends with messages like, "You won't believe this," and "OMG, this is happening right now." Terrence's jaw tightened. Just barely. Just enough for the cameras to catch. Just enough to show the world that even titanium self-control has limits. "Ladies," he said, and something in his tone made the chandelier crystals seem to vibrate. "I'm going to need to speak with your branch manager." Immediately, Jennifer's perfectly microbladed eyebrows rose. "Our branch manager handles exclusively high-net-worth accounts, sir. Accounts with balances that..." She paused, letting her eyes perform another humiliating scan. "That would require verification I'm quite certain you cannot provide." "Perhaps," Sharon added, her voice dripping with false sympathy that felt like acid. "You'd be more comfortable at the community banking center? It's approximately 8 blocks east. They're much more accustomed to handling diverse clientele." The word diverse landed like a slur, because it was meant to be a slur. A corporate-approved, HR-vetted, technically defensible slur. Terrence placed his briefcase on the marble counter with a sound like a judge's gavel. The movement was controlled, deliberate, somehow more threatening than any aggressive gesture could have been. "Get your manager now." That's when she appeared. Diane Morrison had ruled this branch for 9 years like a feudal lord governing conquered territory. Her walls were covered with performance awards that sparkled like military medals. Customer service excellence plaques that proclaimed her dedication to client relations. Framed photographs with local politicians, business leaders, people whose faces appeared in the society pages and whose opinions shaped municipal elections. She was a woman who'd built a career on reading people, on knowing, within 15 seconds of observation, exactly who deserved attention and who deserved security. She'd never, not once in 9 years, been wrong. Until today. Her Louboutin heels struck marble with metronomic precision. Each click announced authority. Each step proclaimed dominance. Each movement said, "I am in control here. I decide who belongs. I determine who stays and who goes." What seems to be the problem? Her voice carried the temperature of liquid nitrogen. The question was rhetorical. Her eyes had already judged, convicted, and sentenced. Jennifer practically vibrated with relief. "Ms. Morrison, this individual claims he requires access to premium account services, but he's been unable to provide appropriate verification of his status." Diane's smile could have flash-frozen hell itself. She turned to Terrence with the expression of someone about to exterminate an insect. An irritating, insignificant insect that had somehow infiltrated a space it had no business occupying. "Sir," she began, her tone suggesting the word "sir" was a courtesy she was already regretting. "I'm going to need comprehensive verification. Government-issued identification. Social Security documentation. Proof of account relationship with this institution. And a detailed explanation of exactly what business you believe you have requiring executive-level intervention." The lobby had transformed into the Coliseum. 43 witnesses now, drawn by the commotion, by the whispers, by the primal human attraction to watching someone get destroyed. Phones everywhere, recording from every angle. Multiple live streams already broadcasting to thousands of viewers who were commenting in real time. This is insane. Someone identify this racist manager. I'm literally watching discrimination in HD. Bank about to get sued. Terrence reached into his jacket with movements so deliberate they seemed choreographed. As his hand emerged, something caught the light. A flash of metal that seemed to bend illumination in impossible ways. The corner of a card bearing engravings so fine they required magnification to appreciate. The kind of black titanium that only exists in the wallets of people who move markets before breakfast. He placed his driver's license on the counter with the soft click of a chess piece claiming checkmate. Diane examined it like forensic evidence at a crime scene. Her perfectly manicured nail, painted the color of dried blood, tapped against the plastic as she read. Terrence Blake, she pronounced, transforming his name into an indictment. Each syllable loaded with skepticism, with disbelief, with the unshakable certainty that this name, this face, this man could not possibly be who his documentation claimed. She looked up, her expression morphing into something uglier than simple suspicion, something closer to contempt. Mr. Blake, she said, and the way she pronounced his name made it sound like an accusation. What I'm struggling to comprehend is why a man of your particular demographic believes he possesses business requiring my personal attention. The words exploded across the lobby like shrapnel from a social grenade. The businessman's Wall Street Journal slipped from his fingers, forgotten. The Chanel-wearing grandmother gasped audibly, her hand flying to her Van Cleef necklace. The college student's live stream erupted with comments coming too fast to read, a digital riot of outrage and disbelief. Even Wallace, the security guard who'd witnessed every permutation of human ugliness over 2 decades, visibly flinched. His hand moved unconsciously toward his radio, then stopped, uncertain whether to intervene or simply document. Behind Diane, Jennifer and Sharon exchanged glances that telegraphed their thoughts. She actually said it. Out loud. On camera. Terrence remained absolutely motionless. A statue carved from marble and controlled rage. Ms. Morrison, he said quietly, his voice now carrying harmonics that made every person present lean forward unconsciously. I believe we have a fundamental misunderstanding that requires private correction. The only misunderstanding, Mr. Blake, Diane's voice crescendoed like an opera singer approaching her death note, is your apparent delusion that you belong in this establishment. She was warming up now, emboldened by her own righteousness, by 9 years of never being challenged, by the absolute certainty that she was protecting her bank from exactly this type of situation. This is First Harbor National's flagship location. We serve Fortune 500 executives, federal judiciary members, families whose wealth predates the Civil War. She paused, letting that historical marker land with maximum impact. We do not serve individuals engaged in check fraud, benefit scams, or whatever scheme brought you through those doors. The lobby wasn't silent anymore. It was erupting. Whispers became conversations, became arguments. The college student's live stream had hit 50,000 viewers. A local news producer, having coffee 3 blocks away when the alert came through her Twitter feed, was already dispatching a crew. And the phones. God, the phones. Dozens of them now, creating a permanent digital record of this moment. Evidence that would survive longer than careers, longer than reputations, longer than Diane Morrison's ability to find employment in any professional capacity. Terrence's phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a text message visible to anyone within reading distance. Board meeting in 15. Where are you? Diane's eyes locked onto the phone like a heat-seeking missile. Sir, eliminate that distraction immediately. You're disturbing legitimate clients and creating a hostile environment. That's when Terrence Blake smiled. Not broadly, not threateningly, just the smallest curve of lips that somehow shifted the molecular structure of the room itself. Like watching gravity reverse. Like witnessing the moment before a tsunami pulls back from shore. Ms. Morrison, he said, his voice now carrying the kind of authority that makes stock prices move and governments reconsider. I believe it's time we had that private conversation. Your office. Now. From his briefcase, he extracted a single manila folder. As it opened, Diane glimpsed letterhead that made her cardiovascular system attempt immediate evacuation. Official. Embossed. Bearing a logo she saw every single day. The First Harbor National Bank executive seal. Terrence closed the folder before comprehension could fully form. Before her brain could process what her eyes had registered. Before reality could complete its demolition of her certainty. Your office, he repeated. Or I can conduct this conversation in front of your clients, your staff, and approximately 60,000 social media viewers. The choice, Ms. Morrison, is entirely yours. Diane Morrison's world began fracturing like ice under pressure. The manila folder in Terrence Blake's hands radiated menace. She'd glimpsed that letterhead. Official. Familiar. Impossible. But her mind rejected what her eyes had seen. Survival instincts demanded denial. Ego required disbelief. My office, she managed, her voice betraying the first hairline crack in her armor. The first sign that her foundation was built on sand. Wise choice, Terrence replied, closing his briefcase with surgical precision. The walk to her glass office felt like a perp walk. Like the march to a guillotine. Like those final steps death row inmates take toward their reckoning. Behind them, the lobby had become a mob scene. 67 people now, drawn from upper floors, from neighboring businesses, from the street outside where word was spreading like wildfire. The crowd pressed against the glass walls of Diane's office, creating an amphitheater for her professional execution. The college student's live stream hit 100,000 viewers. Her commentary was breathless. They're going into her office. Oh my God. You guys, this is about to explode. Whatever he's about to show her is going to destroy her entire life. The comments section had achieved critical mass. Someone identify this manager. First Harbor about to lose billions. This man better own that entire bank when he's done. Screen recording everything before they delete. Diane's hands trembled as she closed her office door. But glass walls provide no sanctuary, no privacy, no escape from accountability. Every gesture remained visible. Every micro-expression. Every moment of her realization that she'd made a mistake that would define her existence. Mr. Blake, she began, desperately attempting to resurrect her managerial authority. Perhaps we can resolve this misunderstanding privately and move forward with. Can we? Terrence interrupted, and something in his tone made her words die like flowers touched by frost. He opened the manila folder with the ceremony of a priest performing last rites. Diane's eyes locked onto the contents. Her brain processed the words slowly, like a computer running outdated software trying to load a file too large for its capacity. First Harbor National Bank Office of the Chief Executive Officer, Executive Priority Communication. But it was the signature at the bottom that made her cardiovascular system attempt immediate evacuation. That made her grip the edge of her desk until her knuckles bleached white as bone. That made her entire universe fracture into fragments of horrified realization. Terrence Blake, Chief Executive Officer. This document, Terrence said with the calm of a surgeon explaining terminal diagnosis, concerns systematic discrimination patterns across our branch network. Patterns that have cost this institution approximately $200 million in lost business, legal settlements, and reputational damage over the past 18 months. That pronoun, our, it struck Diane like a physical blow, like a hammer to the solar plexus. Like the moment you realize you've stepped off a cliff and gravity hasn't caught up yet, but it will. Oh God, it will. Outside her glass cage, the crowd had grown to nearly 100. News crews were arriving. Local reporters recognizing that whatever was happening behind that glass was the story of the year, of the decade. The kind of story that ends careers and changes institutions. Wallace, the security guard's radio crackled. Wallace, status report. Social media is exploding about some incident at your location. What's your situation? He keyed the mic with trembling fingers, his eyes locked on the scene unfolding in the glass office. Situation is, sir, I think we're about to have a major problem. The branch manager. I think she just discriminated against someone very, very important. How important? Wallace watched Terrence Blake through the glass, watched Diane Morrison's face crumbling in real time, watched history being made. I think she just racially profiled our CEO, sir. The radio went silent. Then, say again, the man she tried to remove from the building? I think he owns the building. Inside the glass fishbowl, Diane was drowning in slow motion. Mr. Blake, she whispered, her voice disintegrating like paper and acid. I need to understand. I didn't know. You have to understand I couldn't have possibly known who you were. Terrence studied her with the clinical interest of an entomologist examining a particularly fascinating specimen. A specimen that was about to be pinned to a board for educational purposes. Couldn't have known, he repeated softly. Or couldn't have imagined. Couldn't have recognized my face from the annual reports? From the company website? From the executive portraits in the conference room on the floor directly above your head. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than shouting. Or is it simpler than that, Ms. Morrison? You couldn't imagine that a black man in an expensive suit belonged in this building because your prejudice won't allow you to see past skin color? Diane's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. A fish suffocating on dry land. A woman realizing that every word would be used against her. That silence would be used against her. That her entire existence had become evidence in a trial she'd already lost. Terrence withdrew his phone, checking the screen with deliberate casualness. The video currently has 137,000 views. And that's just the primary upload. When you factor in shares, reposts, news coverage, we're approaching 500,000 people who've watched you commit the most well-documented act of corporate racism in banking history. He turned the phone toward her. The screen showed her own face, frozen in an expression of contempt as she told him he didn't belong. The comments were a waterfall of outrage. I will never bank here again. Just close my account. Calling my lawyer. This is 2024, and we're still dealing with this. That manager better be fired. Diane stared at her own image, at proof of her prejudice preserved forever in digital amber. This can't be happening, she muttered, the words barely audible. But it is happening. Terrence replied with the patience of a teacher explaining basic mathematics to a struggling student. It's happening because you made a choice. Multiple choices, actually. Choices that seemed justified by policy, by procedure, by just doing your job. Choices that were actually systematic discrimination operating under corporate cover. He withdrew a second folder from his briefcase. Thicker than the first. More ominous. These are the discrimination complaints filed against your branch in the past 2 years. Would you care to guess how many? Diane's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Her brain was overloading. Too much information. Too much horror. Too much consequence. 83 complaints, Ms. Morrison. 83 human beings who were judged, humiliated, and driven away based on your staff's prejudices. Prejudices you cultivated, supervised, allowed to flourish under your direct management. He began reading names. Each one a hammer blow. Marcus Chun, denied business banking services despite running a tech company valued at $40 million. Your staff told him to try the ethnic community branch. Alicia Okonkwo, Harvard MBA, vice president at Microsoft, told she should return with proper documentation when she tried to open a private wealth account. Javier Rodriguez, accused of check fraud when depositing his quarterly bonus from Goldman Sachs. Your teller called security. Dr. Aisha Patel, cardiologist at Mount Sinai, 8-figure net worth. Your manager suggested she might be more comfortable at a different institution. Each name fell like a stone into water, creating ripples that would never stop spreading. 83 people, Ms. Morrison. 83 lives you impacted. 83 pieces of evidence that your branch operates as a segregation machine. How much business did we lose? How much damage did you cause? How many people did you traumatize in the name of protecting this bank? Diane's professional mask had completely disintegrated. Mascara streaked her cheeks like war paint. Foundation cracked around her eyes. The face of a woman watching her soul abandon her body in real time. Terrence's phone buzzed. The caller ID made his expression shift into something resembling grim satisfaction. He answered immediately. Yes, I've seen the video. Yes, I'm at the branch currently. He paused, his eyes locked on Diane. Actually, I'm sitting across from the branch manager as we speak. Diane heard her title and felt like she might vomit. Understood. Yes, the full board needs emergency briefing. Conference room immediately. Another pause, longer this time, more weighted. And yes, Ms. Morrison will be joining us. This conversation requires institutional attention. He ended the call and stood, gathering his files with the methodical precision of a prosecutor preparing closing arguments. Ms. Morrison, he said, his voice now carrying frequencies that made every person in the lobby beyond her glass walls lean forward unconsciously. You're about to receive the most expensive education in corporate accountability this industry has ever witnessed. The elevator ride to the 26th floor executive suite lasted exactly 52 seconds. 52 seconds that felt like descending into the deepest circle of hell. Diane pressed herself against the polished brass wall, watching floor numbers climb like a countdown to her own execution. Her reflection stared back, makeup ruined, eyes hollow. The face of a woman who'd just realized she'd destroyed everything she'd built with a single morning's prejudice. Terrence stood beside her with the stillness of an apex predator. His breathing remained steady. His posture relaxed. His expression held the terrifying calm of a man who owned not just this elevator, not just this building, but every molecule of air she was desperately trying to breathe. The numbers climbed. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. Ms. Morrison, Terrence said softly, his voice deadlier than shouting could ever be. Before those doors open, I need you to understand something with absolute clarity. Diane's throat constricted. She managed a whispered, "What?" What happened downstairs wasn't just discrimination. It was a masterclass in institutional racism, performed in ultra-high definition, broadcast to 500,000 viewers, and documented with enough evidence to fill federal courtrooms for the next decade. You didn't just humiliate one customer. You gutted this organization's reputation with surgical precision. You became the face of everything toxic in American banking. The elevator doors opened like the mouth of a dragon. The executive floor was Mount Olympus made manifest. Hand-carved mahogany panels lined corridors wide enough for royalty to parade through. Original Basquiat's and Liechtenstein's adorned walls like windows into other dimensions. The carpet beneath their feet had been woven by Belgian artisans and cost more per square foot than most people earned in a month. But Diane noticed none of this opulence. Her universe had collapsed to the sound of Terrence's footsteps echoing like gunshots and the thunderous pounding of her heart. They passed offices belonging to financial titans. Doors bearing nameplates that represented more power than Diane had ever dreamed of touching. Each threshold they crossed brought her closer to a reckoning that would redefine her understanding of consequence. At the corridor's end, double doors crafted from Brazilian rosewood guarded the boardroom where her fate would be pronounced. Terrence paused at those doors, his hand resting on handles that gleamed like molten gold. Ms. Morrison, in approximately 30 seconds, you're going to discover why this moment will be studied in business schools for the next 50 years. You're going to learn what happens when institutional prejudice meets individual accountability. You're going to become a cautionary tale. He pushed open the doors. The boardroom was the Vatican of capitalism. A table carved from a single piece of 1,000-year-old Indonesian teak dominated the space, surrounded by leather chairs that cost more than luxury vehicles. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city sprawling below like an empire awaiting commands. And seated around that table were 11 of the most dangerous people in American finance. Victoria Cross, whose investment decisions had toppled governments. Robert Kingsley, former Treasury Secretary whose whispered words moved trillions. Sarah Lynn, the legal assassin who'd rewritten banking regulation with precedent-setting cases. James Beaumont, federal prosecutor who'd sent titans to maximum security prisons. 11 economic predators who controlled more wealth than most nations. 11 individuals whose combined power could reshape reality itself. They looked up as Terrence entered. Confusion flickered across their faces as they noticed Diane following like a lamb being led to slaughter. "Terrence," Victoria Cross said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never been refused anything in her life. "We've all seen the video. Please tell me you're not the man in that footage." Diane's brain experienced complete system failure. The man in the video. The victim. Which meant Terrence was the victim. Which meant she had. The realization hit her like a freight train loaded with liquid nitrogen. "Ladies and gentlemen," Terrence announced, his voice filling the boardroom like the voice of God announcing Judgment Day. "I present Diane Morrison, manager of our flagship downtown branch." The temperature in the room dropped to absolute zero. 11 pairs of eyes locked onto Diane like heat-seeking missiles acquiring their target. These weren't executives. They were apex predators who'd built empires from the bones of people exactly like her. Ms. Morrison, Terrence continued with ceremonial precision, meet the board of directors of First Harbor National Bank. The words detonated in Diane's skull like atomic bombs. Board of directors. His board of directors. The people who governed the institution. The ultimate authority. The final word on everything from policy to personnel too. Her knees buckled. Only desperate grip on the doorframe prevented her complete collapse. "No," she whispered, the word escaping like steam from a ruptured pipe. "No, no, 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 no. I'm Terrence Blake," he said, moving to the head of the table where a throne of leather and power waited. "Chief Executive Officer of First Harbor National Bank. Perhaps you remember my face from the annual report? From the website? From the portrait hanging in your branch's conference room?" He gestured toward the brass nameplate gleaming in afternoon sunlight. "Terrence Blake, Chief Executive Officer, First Harbor National Bank." Diane's vision exploded into white-hot static. Reality fractured. The universe split. Every law of her world violated in a single moment of horrified comprehension. The man she'd humiliated, threatened with arrest, discriminated against in front of hundreds of witnesses, told he didn't belong. Her ultimate boss. The signature on every corporate communication. The face on annual reports. The person who could end her with less effort than swatting an insect. "Oh God," she whispered, and the words echoed in the cathedral boardroom like blasphemy in a church. "Oh sweet Jesus, oh God, oh God, oh God." Around the table, 11 faces registered expressions ranging from volcanic fury to barely restrained homicidal intent. Robert Kingsley's face had turned the color of fresh blood. "Mr. Blake, please tell me you weren't actually threatened with arrest in your own building." "I was threatened with police action," Terrence confirmed with surgical precision. "By Ms. Morrison, in front of approximately 100 witnesses, while attempting to conduct routine banking business at my own institution." Sarah Lynn leaned forward like a shark scenting blood. "And this entire incident was recorded? Multiple angles? Currently viral? Approaching 600,000 views across all platforms, with exponential growth," Terrence replied. "Multiple news outlets have picked up the story. Civil rights organizations are calling for federal investigations. We're trending nationally." The boardroom fell silent as a tomb. Diane stood at the threshold, watching her entire world end in real time, and understood with perfect clarity that her life as she knew it was over. Victoria Cross's voice could have frozen the surface of the sun. "Ms. Morrison, step inside. Close the door behind you." Diane's legs moved mechanically, carrying her forward against every survival instinct screaming at her to run, to flee, to disappear. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a prison cell locking. 11 apex predators studied her with expressions promising swift, merciless, biblical justice. "Ms. Morrison," Terrence Blake said, settling into his chair like a king claiming his throne. "Before we discuss the comprehensive destruction of your career, your reputation, and quite possibly your entire future, I believe we should review exactly what you've cost this institution." His laptop opened. The wall-mounted screen flickered to life, and the numbers that appeared made several board members audibly gasp. "These," Terrence said, his smile now carrying apocalyptic weight, "are the consequences of your racism." Diane stared at the screen, at numbers so catastrophic they seemed impossible, at evidence of damage so severe it would take years to calculate, at proof that her prejudice hadn't just destroyed her life. It had cost the bank everything. The numbers on the screen weren't just catastrophic. They were apocalyptic. $1.2 billion in market capitalization evaporated. The figure hung in the air like a death sentence. Diane Morrison stared at it, her brain struggling to process numbers with that many zeros. Numbers that represented more money than she would earn in 1,000 lifetimes. Numbers that she had destroyed in less than 4 hours. "Stock price," Terrence continued, his voice clinical and precise as a surgeon's scalpel, "has plummeted 9.3% since your performance went viral. That's the single largest single-day drop in First Harbor National's 78-year history. Congratulations, Ms. Morrison. You've made history." Robert Kingsley's knuckles were white against the mahogany table. 9.3%. In 4 hours. Because she couldn't see past skin color. The screen shifted, revealing social media analytics that made Diane's legs give out completely. She collapsed into the nearest chair, the leather groaning under her sudden weight. 6.7 million video views across all platforms. 847,000 shares. 3.2 million comments. 96% negative. Trending number 1 nationally. Hashtag First Harbor Racism. Trending number 3 nationally. Hashtag Boycott First Harbor. Trending number 7 nationally. Hashtag Diane Racist Manager. Her name. Her actual name. Trending globally. Attached forever to racism. To discrimination. To institutional prejudice. Ms. Morrison, Sarah Lynn said. Her prosecutorial instincts fully weaponized. You're currently the most infamous person in American banking. Your face is being shared more times per minute than most celebrity scandals. You've achieved a level of notoriety that advertising executives would pay billions to achieve. Except instead of fame, you've earned permanent infamy. The screen showed a cascade of screenshots. News articles, blog posts, think pieces, academic analyses already being written about this moment. CNN, Racism in Banking, the Diane Morrison case. Washington Post, How One Manager's Prejudice Cost a Bank Over $1 billion. New York Times, The Most Expensive Act of Discrimination in Corporate History. Wall Street Journal, First Harbor National Faces Existential Crisis After Viral Racism Incident. International coverage spanning 83 countries. Her face on screens from Tokyo to London to Sao Paulo. The American manager who embodied everything toxic about institutional racism, broadcast globally, preserved forever in digital permanence. The financial services industry, Terrence said, advancing to the next slide, is a remarkably small world. Everyone knows everyone. And now, everyone knows you. The screen showed messages. Hundreds of them. From executives across the banking sector. Is this your branch manager? We're pulling our partnership. Disgusted. Terminating all cross-institutional agreements effective immediately. Our board demands explanation before we continue business relationship. This is unconscionable. We're exploring alternative banking partners. Victoria Cross leaned forward, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd orchestrated the downfall of empires. Ms. Morrison, your racism has triggered a cascade failure across our entire partnership network. 7 major institutional relationships are currently under review, or have already been terminated. The remaining 3 are demanding your immediate termination as a condition of continuing business. Diane's voice emerged as barely a whisper. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You didn't mean? James Beaumont's voice cracked like thunder. You threatened our CEO with arrest. In his own building. On camera. While being recorded by hundreds of witnesses. What exactly did you think would happen? The screen shifted to legal exposure analysis. The numbers made several board members physically recoil. Federal civil rights violations, $200 to $400 million potential damages. Title VII claims, unlimited punitive exposure. State discrimination violations, $125 million estimated liability. FDIC regulatory fines, $50 million minimum. Department of Justice investigation, pending, potentially $500 million plus. Class action lawsuits, already filed, 127 plaintiffs and growing. Total conservative exposure, $1.2 to $2.1 billion. $1.2 billion, Robert Kingsley repeated, each word dropping like a stone into still water. At minimum, that's conservative. That assumes we can contain this hemorrhaging, which becomes less likely every second this video continues spreading. Sarah Lynn pulled up legal documentation on her tablet. We've received notification of 7 class action lawsuits filed in the past 3 hours. The lead plaintiff is Dr. Aisha Patel, the cardiologist your branch turned away last year. She's alleging a pattern and practice of discrimination spanning multiple years under your direct supervision. Diane's face had gone the color of old newspaper. But I didn't know she was a doctor. She didn't look like. She stopped, the trap closing around her throat. Any sentence that started with didn't look like would become evidence, would be quoted in legal filings, would prove the systematic nature of her prejudice. Didn't look like what, Ms. Morrison? Terrence asked softly. A doctor? A person worthy of service? A human being deserving dignity? Silence. Deafening, suffocating silence. The screen advanced to customer defection analysis. The projections were catastrophic. High net worth accounts at risk, 3,247 accounts. Average account value, $2.1 million. Potential deposit loss, $6.8 billion. Annual revenue impact, $287 million. Accounts already closed, 412 in 4 hours. Deposits withdrawn, $847 million and accelerating. Victoria Cross's whisper was somehow more terrifying than shouting. Ms. Morrison, your prejudice has triggered the largest banking run in modern history. Not because of financial instability, not because of market conditions, because you're a racist who humiliated our CEO on camera. The screen showed testimonials from customers explaining why they'd closed their accounts. Each one a dagger. I'm a black business owner. If they treat their own CEO this way, how would they treat me? This is 2024. There's no excuse for this behavior. Taking my money elsewhere. Been a customer for 30 years. Can't support an institution that allows this level of discrimination. My family has banked here for 3 generations. Today that ends. Each lost customer, Terrence continued, tells an average of 11 people about their decision. Those 11 tell others. The reputational contamination spreads exponentially. Marketing experts estimate it will take us 7 to 10 years to rebuild the brand equity you destroyed in 7 minutes. The regulatory nightmare came next. Department of Justice, pattern and practice investigation initiated. FDIC, immediate audit of all 847 branches. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, compliance review triggered. State banking departments, 14 states launching concurrent investigations. Congressional oversight, 5 committees demanding testimony. Federal Reserve, enhanced supervision status under consideration. James Beaumont studied the documentation with predatory intensity. Ms. Morrison, do you understand what a pattern and practice investigation means? Diane shook her head mutely. It means, Beaumont continued, his voice carrying prosecutorial authority, that federal investigators will examine every decision, every policy, every customer interaction at your branch for the past 5 years minimum. They'll interview every employee, review every complaint, analyze every demographic disparity, and they'll have subpoena power to access everything. He paused, letting that sink in. They'll discover every other person you discriminated against, every minority customer you turned away, every person of color you treated as a criminal. And each one becomes evidence. Each one becomes ammunition. Each one becomes another count in the largest civil rights case in banking history. The screen showed complaint data that made Diane emit a sound like air escaping from punctured lungs. Discrimination complaints filed against your branch, 83 in 24 months. Next highest branch, 7 complaints. System-wide average, 2.3 complaints per branch. Your branch, 3,600% above average. 3,600%. Victoria Cross repeated, savoring each syllable like aged wine. Your branch didn't just have a discrimination problem. It was a discrimination problem. You created a culture of prejudice so toxic, so systematic, so well documented that federal prosecutors are literally salivating at the evidence. The screen showed names. 83 names. 83 stories. 83 pieces of evidence that Diane's branch had operated as a segregation machine. Marcus Chun, denied services. Asian entrepreneur told to try the immigrant banking center. Alicia Okonkwo, Harvard MBA, told she didn't fit the profile for premium services. Javier Rodriguez, Goldman Sachs executive, accused of check fraud. Dr. Aisha Patel, 8-figure net worth, suggested she'd be more comfortable elsewhere. Each name appearing on screen with photographs. Real people, real faces, real damage. These aren't just complaints, Sarah Lynn said, her legal mind already constructing the case. These are federal civil rights violations. Each one carries penalties up to $500,000. Multiply that by 83 confirmed cases. That's $41.5 million in fines. Before we even get to compensatory damages, before punitive damages, before reputational harm calculations. She turned to Diane with the expression of a hunter who'd cornered prey. Ms. Morrison, your personal liability for this systematic discrimination could exceed your lifetime earning capacity by a factor of 50. You'll be paying for this racism until the day you die. Outside the boardroom, the world was erupting. Wallace, the security guard, stood in the main lobby watching the viral explosion in real time on his phone. The video had evolved beyond a single incident. It had become a movement. Hashtags multiplied like bacteria. Hashtag Justice for Terrence, 4.2 million tweets. Hashtag Banking While Black, 2.8 million tweets. Hashtag Diane Racist Manager, 1.9 million tweets. Hashtag Boycott First Harbor, 3.1 million tweets. The college student who'd filmed the original video was being interviewed by CNN, by MSNBC, by every major news outlet desperate to capture the story that was dominating global conversation. I just started recording because I could tell something was wrong, she told Anderson Cooper, her voice trembling with the weight of what she'd captured. I've seen this happen before. Black people being treated like criminals just for existing in spaces white people think they own. But this time the person they were discriminating against owned the entire building. The irony was being discussed by sociologists, by cultural critics, by civil rights organizations who saw in this moment a perfect encapsulation of systemic racism. Anonymous was already at work. Within hours, they'd compiled a comprehensive dossier on Diane Morrison, her employment history, her social media posts, her affiliations, every digital footprint she'd ever left. Screenshots of her Facebook posts from 2019. These people need to learn to work hard like the rest of us instead of looking for handouts. Her Twitter from 2020, retweeting content about urban crime. Her LinkedIn endorsements from colleagues praising her commitment to maintaining branch standards and protecting the bank's reputation. Each post is now being recontextualized, re-examined, revealed as evidence of the prejudice that had always existed beneath her professional veneer. Her personal life was disintegrating in real time. Her husband, a middle manager at an insurance firm, received a call from his CEO. We've seen the video. We're a diversity-forward organization. Your wife's actions don't align with our values. We need to discuss your future here. Her daughter, a sophomore at State University, was being confronted in the dining hall. Your mom's that racist bank manager? Wow. How does it feel knowing your entire tuition was paid with discrimination money? Her son's Little League team was buzzing. Parents pulling their kids aside. Maybe it's best if Tyler doesn't have playdates at their house anymore. The neighborhood Facebook group had erupted. Neighbors she'd known for years suddenly viewed her through a different lens. The community she'd thought she belonged to, revealing itself as something far more conditional than she'd imagined. Her mother called, voice thick with tears. Diane, what have you done? Your father and I are being asked about this at church. At the grocery store. People are looking at us like we raised a monster. Back in the boardroom, Terrence was presenting the final piece of evidence. The one that would demolish any remaining doubt about Diane's fate. Security footage from the past 18 months. Edited into a devastating compilation. The screen showed Diane's branch in action. Her staff, her culture, her systematic discrimination playing out in high definition. A Hispanic woman approaching the counter. The teller's eyes going cold. The subtle head shake to a colleague. The woman being told there's nothing we can do before even hearing her request. A black man in business casual dress trying to open an account. The forms being pushed across the counter with barely disguised contempt. The extra verification being demanded that white customers never faced. An elderly Asian couple attempting to make a large deposit. The manager being called. Suspicious questions. Implications of money laundering. The couple leaving, humiliated, their business going to a competitor. Young black professionals being watched by security like shoplifters. Middle Eastern customers being subjected to random, additional screening. Latino entrepreneurs being steered towards subprime products despite qualifying for premium services. A 17-minute compilation of systematic, documented, indisputable racism. This footage, Terrence said quietly, represents 18 months under your leadership. 18 months of culture you created. Policies you enforced. Discrimination you cultivated. This is your legacy, Ms. Morrison. Diane was weeping now. Silent tears streaming down her face. Carving rivers through foundation that had long since cracked. Her mascara painting black streaks like war paint. The physical manifestation of a soul realizing the magnitude of harm it had caused. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't realize it was this bad. You didn't know, Victoria Cross repeated, her voice devoid of sympathy. Because you didn't care. You didn't realize because you never questioned your assumptions. You created a branch where discrimination was policy, where prejudice was procedure, where racism was the culture. Robert Kingsley stood, his chair scraping against imported Italian marble. Ms. Morrison, I've sat on this board for 23 years. I've overseen mergers, acquisitions, market crashes, regulatory crises. I've never, in all that time, witnessed a single employee cause damage approaching this magnitude. He walked to the window, staring out at the city below, at the bank's other branches, at an institution that would now spend years rebuilding what one woman's prejudice had destroyed. You cost us over $1 billion. You triggered federal investigations that will take years to resolve. You destroyed partnerships built over decades. You traumatized hundreds of customers. You made our CEO, a black man who rose to the top of this industry through extraordinary talent and dedication, feel like a criminal in his own building. He turned back, his expression harder than the steel girders holding the building upright. And perhaps worst of all, you did it while absolutely certain you were right, while convinced you were protecting this institution, while believing your racism was justified by policy and procedure. Terrence Blake stood, signaling the end of the trial phase and the beginning of sentencing. Ms. Morrison, your employment with First Harbor National Bank is terminated immediately. Effective this moment. Security will escort you from the building within the next 15 minutes. Diane's voice cracked. My pension? My benefits? Your pension is forfeited under the morality clause in your employment contract. Your stock options are voided. Your benefits terminate today. Your professional references will accurately reflect termination for cause related to civil rights violations and systematic discrimination. Sarah Lynn opened her briefcase, extracting documents that landed on the table like sentencing papers. Furthermore, the bank will be pursuing personal liability claims against you for damages exceeding compensatory capabilities. We'll be garnishing wages from any future employment, placing liens on any assets, ensuring that you spend the remainder of your professional life paying for the harm you've caused. James Beaumont added, the Department of Justice has indicated you may face individual criminal charges for conspiracy to violate civil rights. Federal prosecutors are building a case that your systematic discrimination constitutes a criminal enterprise. You're looking at potential prison time. Prison time. The words echoed in Diane's skull like a death sentence. Additionally, Terrence continued, you're prohibited from any future employment in financial services. We'll be notifying industry regulators of your termination and the reasons for it. Your FINRA licenses will be revoked. Your certifications will be challenged. You will never work in banking again. The walls were closing in. Every exit was blocked. Every escape route was sealed. You have 30 minutes to collect personal items under security supervision. Any company property, documents, or electronic data must remain. Any attempt to access company systems will be treated as criminal hacking. Any attempt to contact current employees will be treated as witness tampering. Victoria Cross delivered the final blow. And Ms. Morrison? Every person you discriminated against is being contacted by our legal team. We're facilitating their participation in class action lawsuits. We're providing evidence for their individual claims. We're helping them pursue every legal remedy available. Because unlike you, we believe in accountability. Diane Morrison's perp walk happened at 2:47 p.m. Security flanked her on both sides as she walked through the lobby where, just hours earlier, she'd been an authority figure, where she'd wielded power, where she'd felt important. Now she was a criminal being escorted from the crime scene. The lobby was filled with employees from multiple floors, with customers who'd heard about the incident, with reporters who'd been tipped off that something significant was happening. They watched in absolute silence as Diane Morrison, carrying a cardboard box of personal effects, walked past the marble counter where she'd humiliated Terrence Blake, past the spot where she'd threatened him with arrest, past the witnesses who'd recorded her racism. The college student was still there, phone out, capturing this moment too. There she goes, she narrated for her live stream audience, now exceeding 300,000 concurrent viewers. The racist bank manager being fired and removed from the building. This is what accountability looks like. Outside, the media circus was in full swing. Camera crews from 7 local stations, national news correspondents, print journalists. The story had achieved critical mass. Diane emerged into flashbulbs and shouted questions. Ms. Morrison, do you have a comment about the discrimination allegations? Did you know Mr. Blake was the CEO when you threatened him? What do you say to the 83 other people who filed complaints? Will you be apologizing to Mr. Blake and the other victims? She kept her head down, moving toward her car like a prisoner toward a transport van. But there was no escape. The footage would follow her forever. Her face, captured in that moment of humiliation, would be as permanent as her original act of discrimination. Her car wouldn't start. Of course it wouldn't. The universe was delivering cosmic justice. A reporter's camera captured her sitting in the driver's seat, hands gripping the steering wheel, sobbing with the kind of despair that comes from watching your entire life disintegrate. But Terrence Blake wasn't interested in personal revenge. He was interested in systematic transformation. By 5 p.m. that same day, he'd assembled an emergency all-hands meeting. Every branch manager in the system, every regional director, every executive, connected via video conference to 847 locations simultaneously. His face appeared on screens from coast to coast. The CEO they'd just watched being discriminated against. The man who'd maintained supernatural calm while being threatened with arrest in his own building. "What happened today," he began, his voice carrying to thousands of employees, "cannot ever happen again. Not at this institution. Not on my watch. Not while I have the power to prevent it." The screen behind him showed the viral video, showed Diane Morrison's face, showed the systematic discrimination that had flourished under institutional cover. This isn't just about one manager. This is about a culture that allowed this behavior to persist, about systems that enabled discrimination, about all of us failing to protect the dignity of every person who walks through our doors. He unveiled the transformation plan. Comprehensive, radical, unprecedented in banking history. The equity monitoring system would go live immediately across all branches. Every customer interaction recorded, analyzed, scored for bias indicators. Wait times tracked by demographic. Service quality measured across racial lines. Treatment disparities flagged in real time and escalated to corporate headquarters within minutes. Branch managers would see their bias scores displayed on dashboards visible to every employee. Poor ratings would trigger immediate retraining. Repeated failures would result in automatic termination. No appeals. No second chances. Discrimination would be treated like embezzlement, a career-ending crime with immediate consequences. The customer advocacy hotline would bypass local management entirely. Any discrimination complaint would reach Terrence's desk within 4 hours, complete with security footage, employee records, and recommended disciplinary action. Dignity audits would be conducted quarterly. Corporate executives dressed casually would visit branches unannounced, testing whether they received equal treatment regardless of appearance. Failure would carry severe consequences. Branch managers suspended. Regional directors reviewed. Executives seeing bonuses tied to bias reduction metrics. Mandatory training would evolve beyond sensitivity workshops into immersive experiences. Employees would experience simulated discrimination scenarios, would face consequences for bias, would have compensation and advancement tied to equality metrics. "And here's what's different about this transformation," Terrence said, his voice now carrying harmonics that made every person listening lean forward. "We're not just changing policy. We're changing consequences. Discrimination will no longer result in slap-on-the-wrist warnings. It will result in immediate termination, personal liability, and public accountability." The results were immediate and dramatic. Within the first week, the equity monitoring system flagged 41 discrimination incidents across the network. 41 opportunities to demonstrate that the Diane Morrison era was permanently extinct. The Chicago branch fired 3 employees for racial profiling. The Phoenix location terminated a manager for refusing service to a Hispanic customer. The Atlanta branch cleaned house entirely, removing 7 employees whose bias scores indicated systematic discrimination. Each termination was announced publicly. Each incident became a teaching moment broadcast across social media. The industry watched in amazement as First Harbor transformed from discriminatory institution to equality pioneer in a matter of weeks. The settlements came next, but they served justice rather than corporate cover-up. Terrence personally approved $485 million in payouts to discrimination victims. Each settlement included a public apology, policy reforms, monitoring provisions, ensuring systematic change rather than financial absolution. Dr. Aisha Patel, the cardiologist who'd been turned away, received $12 million. But more importantly, she received vindication. Her experience was validated publicly. Her pain was acknowledged institutionally. Her dignity was restored completely. Marcus Chun, the Asian entrepreneur, received $8.7 million and a formal apology broadcast on the bank's website and social media. Alicia Okonkwo, the Harvard MBA, received $9.2 million and was offered a position on First Harbor's advisory board for diversity and inclusion. Javier Rodriguez, the Goldman Sachs executive, received $7.4 million and an invitation to speak at the bank's anti-discrimination training programs. 83 victims, 83 settlements, 83 stories of discrimination transformed into opportunities for institutional redemption. The NAACP praised First Harbor's transformation as a model for corporate America. The Department of Justice closed its investigation after determining that systematic reforms exceeded federal requirements. Congressional hearings showcased First Harbor as proof that institutional racism could be eliminated through leadership commitment and technological innovation. But the most powerful transformation was cultural. Within 6 months, First Harbor's employee demographics shifted dramatically. Diversity hiring increased 73%. Retention of employees of color improved 91%. Customer satisfaction among minority communities reached historic highs. The business results followed the moral transformation. Customer deposits increased by $2.8 billion as communities of color trusted First Harbor with their financial futures. New account openings among minority-owned businesses surged 340%. Revenue from previously underserved markets exploded to $1.2 billion annually. Terrence had proven something profound. Equality wasn't just ethically required. It was economically beneficial. Discrimination had been costing the bank hundreds of millions in lost opportunities, damaged relationships, and legal exposure. Elimination of bias unlocked previously inaccessible markets and customer bases. 22 months after her termination, Diane Morrison's phone rang. She was working the register at a discount store in rural Tennessee. Minimum wage. No benefits. 53 years old, starting over at the bottom of an economy that had no use for disgraced banking executives. Her house had been foreclosed. Her marriage had disintegrated. Her children had changed their last names and stopped speaking to her. Her parents had died without forgiving her. Her friends had evaporated like morning mist. She'd become a ghost. A cautionary tale. A permanent example of what happens when prejudice meets accountability. The call was from a number she didn't recognize. She answered anyway, because hope dies slowly even in the deepest darkness. Ms. Morrison? This is Janet Wu from the Department of Justice. I'm calling to inform you that criminal charges are being filed against you for conspiracy to violate civil rights. You'll need to appear in federal court next month. Criminal charges. After everything else. After losing everything. The government wanted more. I've already lost everything, Diane whispered into the phone. I lost my job, my pension, my family, my life. What more can you take? There was a pause. Then, Ms. Morrison, the 83 people you discriminated against lost their dignity. Lost opportunities. Lost faith in institutions that were supposed to serve them equally. What you lost was the consequence of your own choices. What they lost was stolen by your prejudice. The call ended. Diane stood in the break room of a discount store, wearing a polyester vest with a name tag, and understood with perfect clarity that her punishment would never end. That her racism would follow her to the grave. That she'd become a permanent symbol of institutional discrimination destroyed by its own toxicity. Meanwhile, the downtown First Harbor branch had become a temple to transformation. Behind the same marble counter where Diane had wielded discrimination like a weapon, Maria Chen now served as branch manager. The Asian entrepreneur who'd once been told to try the immigrant banking center now controlled a budget exceeding $75 million. But the most powerful change was invisible yet infinite. Children of color entered without fear. Elderly immigrants felt welcomed rather than hunted. Young entrepreneurs of every background conducted business with dignity intact. The simple act of banking had been liberated from generations of institutional racism. The numbers told an extraordinary story. Customer satisfaction among communities of color reached 94%, highest in the industry. New business accounts from minority entrepreneurs increased 420%. Revenue from previously excluded markets exploded to $1.4 billion annually. Discrimination had been costing them nearly $1 billion in lost opportunities. Last week, Terrence witnessed a young black entrepreneur secure a seven-figure business loan at the exact counter where Diane Morrison had humiliated him. The staff competed to provide exceptional service. Every employee understood that this branch had been baptized in the blood of discrimination and reborn through systematic justice. Marcus, the entrepreneur, shook hands with loan officers who would have called security on him 22 months earlier. His business would create hundreds of jobs, generate millions in economic activity, build generational wealth, all because he was treated with dignity instead of destroyed by discrimination. Standing in that transformed lobby, Terrence remembered the burning shame of being judged by his skin color in his own building. That humiliation had birthed the most comprehensive civil rights revolution in corporate America. One filmed moment of racism had eliminated systematic discrimination across an entire industry. And that brings us to you. Right now, somewhere in America, someone is facing the same discrimination Terrence endured. Someone is being judged by appearance rather than character. Someone's dignity is being destroyed by prejudice masquerading as policy. You have power Diane Morrison never expected. The power to document, to expose, to destroy discrimination in real time. Your phone is a weapon of justice more powerful than any court. Social media has become an accountability machine that can end careers and transform institutions faster than any law. Record bias when you witness it. Don't look away. Don't stay silent. Don't let discrimination hide in the shadows where it's always thriving. Share stories that demand accountability. Support businesses that demonstrate equality. Speak up when you see prejudice, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's easier to pretend you didn't notice. Because here's what Terrence Blake proved. Sometimes the most devastating response to humiliation is transformation. Sometimes personal pain becomes social progress. Sometimes one person's courage can obliterate institutional racism forever. The question isn't whether discrimination still exists. We know it does. We see it every day. In banks, in stores, in schools, in hospitals, in every institution where power meets prejudice. The real question is, when you witness it, will you be the person who ends it? Will you be the one who hits the record? Who shares the video? Who refuses to let racism hide behind corporate logos and professional courtesy? Or will you look away, like so many have done before, allowing discrimination to continue because speaking up feels uncomfortable? Terrence Blake didn't create the racism he experienced, but he transformed it into justice. He turned humiliation into accountability. He converted personal pain into institutional revolution. You can do the same. If this story moved you, if it made you angry, if it reminded you that dignity matters more than prejudice, then prove it. Share this video. Let it reach someone who needs to see that accountability is still possible, that justice can still prevail, that racism doesn't get the final word. Subscribe if you believe these stories need to be told. Turn on notifications because we're exposing injustice the establishment wants buried. And most importantly, be ready. Be ready to document discrimination when you see it. Be ready to speak up when others stay silent. Be ready to become the kind of person who transforms pain into progress. Because the next Diane Morrison is out there right now, discriminating against someone who doesn't deserve it. And the next Terrence Blake is counting on you to bear witness, to record the evidence, to demand accountability. Don't look away. Justice is watching.